Hi everyone, it's February 1st, 2012, and I'm in Topeka, Kansas at the moment. I should be packing for my trip to New York and Europe that's going to be taking place, but I'm just too tired, and yet I wanted to give you some content tonight. Um, I just didn't really have anything sightseeing wise to show you, and it's too dark to film anyway. But I can tell you something a little bit of a conspiracy slash injustice that happened regarding children and youth series books. And you may recognize these books as being the first versions of Nancy Drew. Um, I don't have any others handy right now, but these are probably not the ones that you were familiar with when you were reading them, either in the first wave, where they became super popular in the 50s and 60s, or the 80s and 90s paperback versions that were more popular when I was growing up. These are from the 1930s, and there's quite a scandal behind these, as I was alluding to earlier. There was a man called Edward Stratemeyer who began writing in the 1890s and started with a series, I think it was Horatio Alger, or inspired by Horatio Alger. And by the end of that decade, he started becoming pretty well known for writing cheap thrillers for teenage and guys in their 20s. Teenage boys and guys in their 20s. And I think his first book, he was so poor that he wrote on like cardboard paper or packing paper and pencil, and the publisher was impressed with his gumption for that. As time went on, he realized that he wouldn't have to write all of these series himself, and he would write, I guess you would call them not just plot summaries, but galleys. I'll have to check if that's the right word for that context. But he would write summaries of what he would want written and then hire ghostwriters. And you probably recognized, if you ever read this series, the Nancy Drew series, that Carolyn Keene was always on there. Well, various versions of that series have been going on since 1930, and obviously they couldn't have all been written by the same person. The same was the case for the Hardy Boys, which I also have on hand, several copies of. These are all facsimile editions, so they're not the actual original versions, which are quite valuable these days if you can get the dust jacket as well. Applewood Books of Massachusetts put these out in the 90s, but I think that they have stopped producing them. Anyway, where was I going? Okay, so the actual author of the first several books of this series was Mildred Wirt Benson, who also wrote the Judy Bolton series under her, I think under her own name, or at least she had more control over that series, and she wrote it all herself. She also wrote several of the original Bobbsey twins. Anyway, she began writing in 1929, and she was paid $125 per volume for these books. And they were wildly popular immediately. And his meeting Edward Stratemeier's strategy and staggered sales method was he would release 3 books of a series in what was called a breeder set. So these first 3 books were published that year. And she had a non-disclosure agreement and was not allowed to ever say that she was the author of the series. Well, in 1930, Edward Stratemeyer died, and his 2 daughters took over the business. But it was really Harriet Stratemeyer that took over the company and had the interest in running it. And she was much more conservative about how she thought the characters should be depicted, and a little bit more of more mainstream, in that she wanted the characters to be more vapid and thus more appealing to what she thought your middle of the road person would want. And so with The Mystery at Lilac Inn, the 4th book, onward, not only did she censor the authors more, but she also reduced their pay with the same agreements. So the next, I think, 4 volumes, Mildred Wirt Benson was only paid $100 per book, but it was the Depression, and that was still a decent wage, because she could crank out these books fairly quickly, like maybe in a 30-day period. But if you read the first 3 books, they're quite different from after that, where the later volumes bring on 2, I guess you could say, stock characters, where they kind of stripped the individual power of Nancy Drew. And similar things were going on with the Hardy Boys as well. The characters were put in less dangerous situations, and they didn't have the same kind of autonomy against their parents that the earlier volumes did. Well, by the time this book was completed, Mildred Wirt Benson really had had enough. And so the next 3 volumes, I don't have the 10th one, I have the 11th. Or, sorry, this is the 10th one. These 3 were written by a male author, actually. I think his name was Walter Carrig. And the language is totally different. Hearsay on the internet is that he was kind of a belligerent person and had an alcohol problem, and so Harriet Stratemeyer ended up going back to Mildred Wirt Benson, and she was able to negotiate better wages. But that wasn't even the worst of it, because the versions that you probably recall of Nancy Drew, I think I sold all of mine or gave them away, were yellow spines and about 30 pages shorter. And they were written from the 50s onward. They were rewrites of these texts where the language was dumbed down. All references to any ethnic characters were obliterated because they were afraid of coming off as racist, which the portrayal of characters who were non-Caucasian were racist, but that was just how it was at that time. And so I think eliminating those characters altogether may have been worse, because that's another form of racism, really. It reflects that people's vocabulary has actually been reduced since this time. Except for the racial expletives, the language in these original versions is just so much more rich and varied. And then as time went on, I think Harriet Strautmeyer ended up writing a lot of the volumes herself. And so instead of having Nancy Drew be very aggressive and solving her own problems, there were a lot of adjectives and adverbs added to soften her her approach to things. So instead of an interrogating type of voice, they would say, Nancy said sweetly, or Nancy whispered, or something much softer, which kind of set women back in a lot of ways, and through indoctrination at a young age. It was not revealed that Mildred Wirt Benson was the original author until 50 years later, when it came out in a lawsuit in 1980. And it was only because she was forced to swear under oath to tell the truth that it all came to light. And she is finally recognized by scholars as the true author of about 25 of the original 37 or 38 first run of the series. She's quite an amazing person as well. You should look her up. She was from Iowa City, Iowa, and just died 10 years ago. And she finally got to enjoy a little bit of fame for that, but she was also a pilot until she was in her 90s, I think. As time has gone on, there have been other revamps of the Nancy Drew series, as well as the Hardy Boys. They tried to appeal to or shape a different kind of demographic. There were further rewrites about 5 to 10 years ago. Now they're about half the length of these original versions. Really, I read one or two of them for a class not too long ago, and it was just embarrassing how poorly written they are, and how stupid they must be trying to make people be at this point. I just can't believe it. And I heard that the movie that came out recently was historically inaccurate as well. Really, I recommend that you read these. They're very fast reads, but also just intriguing. Just a lot of historical detail that would be great to read. More discussion and comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye.